morning, everybody. Let me just say good morning to everybody. Good morning, 828 online as well. It's good to have you all with us this morning. And so we're transitioning to a different version, in a sense, of the same series, really a different series. It'll show up on the 828 Church app if you don't have it, download it, right? And in our message folders, this will be under the heading of God's questions. But even in this series about questions, we're going to tell stories, right? Straight up out of the Bible, going to exposit stories for the rest of the summer. So I'm amped about that. And when you think about God's questions, I mean, you could Google this. You could find what are the top 10 most intriguing, interesting questions that God asks in His Word. I cheated a couple of weeks ago. Like the last message I preached here in the story series was based on God's question to Elijah when He asked Elijah about his showing up at the cave, right, on Sinai, and He said, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Remember that? Yeah. Okay. So if you didn't watch that message, you can go back and check that out if you want to. But it inspired me to think about all these amazing questions God asked in His Word. It started in the garden, like right there in Genesis 3 when Adam and Eve had made a poor choice, and God asked, first of all, where are you? And then, who told you that? Man, and again, I know some of you are new this morning to us, and I should have said this already, but welcome. We're so glad you're here. Welcome to 828 Church, and welcome to the family room. And if you are new to us, what I'm about to say to you, again, looking back historically, but for some of you, you'll remember that last November, we had Craig Johnson in the house, and he actually preached a message called, "Who Told You That?" And it got all up in my business. I'll tell you that right now. Like, it definitely got in my heart, and I've still been living off of that. And I just think when God asks a question, we ought to ponder the answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, that ought to cause us to really consider. His questions are intentional, they're pointed. In some cases, they seem a little bit like, I can't believe you asked me that. Well, you better believe it. And you better find a right response to it, right? Because, again, those questions matter and mean something. Man, you think about Job. I think we might get to preach about that. We'll see how Holy Spirit leads. But I think about in the book of Job and 38 chapters of questions from Job, and then, or 37, you finally get to chapter 38, and then God says, "My turn." And He starts throwing down some questions, 77 of them actually. But his first question was, where were you, right, when I laid the foundations of the earth? Ooh, right. But this morning we're going to bounce to the New Testament and consider some of the questions Jesus asked. And He asked a lot. I remember one time He said to His disciples, "How is it you don't have any faith?" Right? This is a good question. That's fair. And it was meant to inspire them to consider that they should have lots of it, right? But this morning I want to come to you from John chapter 5. Now, I love the book of John in the way that it is different from the other Gospels, which are also awesome. But John wrote a little bit, he left out some of the stories the others told because they told them, and he wrote after they did. And he brought sort of a narrative that was meant to reveal more intimately the heart of Jesus, right? And so he starts with these three different miracles of Jesus to establish the fact that He was God, right? So John kind of takes that approach, and this is the third miracle that he mentions. He waits till chapter 5. And so I think even in that context, that's important to note that he considered the way that this miracle was lived out to say a lot about who Jesus was. And so he comes out of chapter 4 in the Bible. There's a little bit of a period of time here that's indiscriminate. We don't know how long ago this was, or after this was, but John 5 and verse 1 says, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. So the New Testament was primarily written in Greek, but he wanted to understand that this name carried some deep cultural significance to the Hebrew people, and he said it was called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 colored colonnades. Now, little quick detour here for just 1 second off my subject matter this morning, simply to say, I love some archaeology and history, if you know me. And I'd just like to point out that for quite a long while, right, people doubted that they hadn't yet discovered, so doubted that there was actually a pool called Bethesda, these 5 colonnades. But archaeologists have uncovered this place in this space. And it's pretty specific in its description in this passage. And they've found these pools with the covered colonnades, which were almost like covered walkways, but more like an alcove, right? So picture that in the construction of this. And then the word goes on to say, in these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. So I want us in this storytelling to get a bit of a picture of the Pool of Bethesda, right? And when you think about it, we would probably like to think about some sort of a hot spring, and it's like a little bit of a resort sort of space. And it likely was some sort of a hot spring. Older translations that were based actually on newer manuscripts had a bit in there that talked about an angel stirring the water, but when they discovered the more original manuscripts prescribed that actually wasn't a part of what was in there. And I don't think it's in error, but my point is just this, that this was likely more of a hot spring than an actual angel stirring the water. Doesn't matter what we know or believe about that, but it was not a resort. That's the point I'm really trying to get to. Multitudes, like Peterson actually translate this as hundreds. So I want you to get more of a picture of almost like a camp for people who had nowhere to be. Like our unsheltered friends, as we say here in Wilmington, this was like a homeless camp. There were people here who were in dire straits. And I don't think their broken was one particular brand of broken. Like there were people there for all sorts of different reasons. And the reason I say that is because when Jesus starts to communicate solution, he uses terms that really speak to overall, like when he uses words that describe sickness, he's talking about being sick, like not just physically sick, but that there's just an overall brokenness. And we understand that. And we understand a lot of times it's one thing that causes another thing that causes another thing. And we land in a desperate place where we just need a healing that isn't one thing, but we need to be whole. Come on, somebody. And so recognize that in this space, there was that sort of unwholeness, if you will. And it's interesting too, because it was called Bethesda. Now, Bethesda, the word literally means house of mercy. And yet it was this deep and desperate place for multitudes of people. Not to say that it wasn't helpful to some who had nowhere to be, right? That they were glad to get to be there. But I want to share a first takeaway with you just in this regard, and it's just that mercy without the Messiah can bring temporal comfort, but not real healing and transformation. So people there may have found some level of comfort. And it's, I had an incredible conversation this week talking about the difference between sympathy and compassion, right? Because sometimes our efforts at mercy don't actually minister anything but some temporal comfort. Not that there's no value in that, but it's dangerous, right? Because what we need is God's healing. Come on. We need God's solutions in our lives. Not just to feel better, but come on now, to be whole. And then begs the question, why so much brokenness? And not just here at the Pool of Bethesda, but I want us to think about our world, as is always the case here. We're not just trying to unpack a historical perspective. We want to understand how this applies to us today and why so much brokenness. And we could unpack that for a minute. That could take a series in and of itself, right? But the reality is, I'll give you some just quick hitters this morning so that this story has more context. But first of all, I would say the fall. Why so much brokenness in our world? And there's lots. Why so much confusion? Why so much hurt, so much lostness, so much bondage? So much lost destiny. Well, I think it's, first of all, the first explanation is just simply the fall. We're back to the garden again, right? Like a sin-sick world, paradise lost. I believe that. I believe that this world wasn't meant for disobedience, and when disobedience came in, it imperfected. It's like it messed up the system and the solution. God knew it would. That's why he had a solution, right? But when you think about that and you understand what the word even says about it, When you think about people who are physically sick, cells are not lining up the way that they're meant to, or maybe they're replicating faster than they should. And it's because the world has been imperfected. Entropy is a real thing. Things no longer go or stay in order, but go from order to disorder. It's a scientific fact, but it has a spiritual explanation as far as I'm concerned, for sure. We were sitting around chatting, I think it was Friday. I don't even know what Jacob was talking about, but Jacob was talking about something being heavy, like heavy, physically heavy. And he was putting his words together quick, and he said, man, I mean, that is heavy. It's as heavy as sin. Like, so that's a very good example. I mean, I don't know that it's that heavy, but it made it sound real heavy. Because come on, y'all. Oof, disobedience, running away from God, unforgiven sin, which is never necessary, by the way. It's heavy. I mean, it's a weight, and it was obvious and evident here at Bethesda. And then there's spiritual warfare. That's real too. Think about Ephesians 6. Put on the whole armor of God. There's a good idea. So that you'll be able to fight against the devil, because he really does attack. Some in this house this morning, it's not the explanation for everything. It's just the explanation for some things. I don't personally feel like, I mean, he only took a third of heaven's angels. He doesn't have an unlimited army, and he's not battered in Jesus. Come on now. I'm not afraid of him. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The person who's not hanging out with Jesus, the shepherd. That's all I'm trying to say. But if you're hanging out with the good shepherd, you don't have to fear the big bad wolf. Okay. That preached better in my head, but I still feel pretty good about it. Right. But spiritual warfare is real. It is. I mean, again, read Ephesians 6. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Okay. But also consider 1 Corinthians 10 that says, for the weapons of our warfare. Come on now. Yeah, I felt like, I don't know how to dance, y'all, but I know how to stomp my feet. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty. Don't you worry about that. They are mighty. And some of the brokenness, some of the difficulties, some of the bad decisions we're making, there is a spiritual war that is happening, and we need to recognize it. We need to stop trying to chase a bear with a BB gun. Come on. Trying to do better, be better. How about trust Jesus, follow Jesus, let God decide. Come on, yeah. I heard a guy talking about this. This was just a comedian. He was talking about, he said, I don't know why we call hunting a sport. And he wasn't dissing on hunting. He was a hunter. But he said, I just don't feel like we should call it a sport because the other team doesn't even know the game has started. You're just bouncing around having a good time. And it was a Christian comedian. He was making a point. Come on now. The enemy's like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. It's just good to know that. All right, don't be afraid, but be aware. I would say that the third thing that might cause some of that broken is other people. Other people's choices, right? There's a boatload of hate and hurt happening in the world, and sometimes it's on a personal level, an interpersonal level. Sometimes it's nation against nation. It's hard out there, everybody. There's a whole lot of broken just because of broken people doing broken things to other people. And that's true. That might be the explanation for some folks who are sitting here at the Pool of Bethesda in our story today, other people's choices. But the last one is the one in a lot of ways that I think is probably the most impactful beyond the fall, and that would be self-sabotage. Like a fourth reason for brokenness is that as I have said here for as long as 828 Church has been 828 Church, my biggest enemy is the unholy trinity. Me, myself, and I. And we're real good about some self-sabotage. And listen, I have conversations with people sometimes, and I'm expressing to them where I need prayer. And if they're good and honest in talking to me, they may dig a little bit. And, they may say, well, actually, you might want to make some adjustments. I mean, I can pray for you, but you might want to make some adjustments. It's like that person that comes in and says, pray for me, man. I'm really having a hard time with work. I thought I was doing, but I got fired. And then you start talking to them, and then they're like, you need prayer. to actually show up on time and stop, scrolling Instagram when you're supposed to be doing your job. That would be a whole lot of the solution to your situation. I'm just saying, everybody. I'm just saying, we self-sabotage a lot, and then we're looking for what happened. I'm just saying, there's a whole lot of reasons. It's not always that, and it doesn't matter if it's you. I still love you, and I want to see you stop doing that to you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not trying to give you grief for it. I'm just simply saying the truth helps us to find our way to healing. I think this particular man, probably all of this, maybe at least 2 or 3 of these, because 38 years is a long time, everybody. That is a minute. If it was to the day, it's 13,980 days. That's a long time. It's 157 days till Christmas. Since I'm throwing numbers out, I just thought I'd throw that in there for you. But it probably wasn't exactly. It was likely more than 14,000 days, longer than Jesus had been walking on earth as the Messiah. That guy was there before the birth of Christ, who's now standing in front of him. It had been a minute. And the word I specifically chose, coming from the ESV this morning, it says there lay multitudes of invalids, people who had been in this man an invalid for 38 years. And I'm sure you are aware of this, but the word invalid and the word invalid, those words are spelled the exact same way. It's only inflection that makes them different. And often, whatever it is that has caused us broken or bound causes us to be seen or feel like we're seen as invalid. But here comes Jesus. Nobody's invalid. Come on now. Your trouble, you're broken, you're bound does not make you invalid. God loves you, He cares about you, and your value is determined by what somebody is willing to pay for you. And Paul said of us, we were bought with a price. And then he said, so act like it. Treat yourself like a son, a daughter, right? Honor God in your body. That's what he said. 1 Corinthians 6:20. You were bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. You better remember who you are and understand you are valuable, regardless of your broken. Well, I'm not, because listen, you have not changed your value to Jesus. He loves you as much right now as he ever has. Believes in you as much right now as he ever has. And it's a lot, too, by the way. So then Jesus shows up here at the Pool of Bethesda. When Jesus saw him lying there, so there was a man who'd been there for 38 years, verse 4. And then when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there for a long time. That's important, too. I just want you to know Jesus knows and sees. Right? Jesus knows and cares about you and your challenges. Don't ever feel like you're forgotten by God. That's another takeaway for us this morning. But Jesus knows and cares about you and your challenges, your situations. Jesus knew. He already knew that he had been there a long time. And he said to him, are you ready? Do you want to be healed? Now again, the word here as translated healed literally means whole, complete. That's what it means. It's not even just one particular bit of healing. I don't know how y'all right now, I'm 58 and feeling it, okay? I'm 58 and feeling it, for those of you who need me to slow down. And when I go to the doctor, there's never one thing wrong. It's like a list. I usually just get tired of talking about it at some point and go home. Well, yeah, that hurts too. Yeah, but I'm used to that. I'm really just talking about this thing that's new. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I'm at. Well, what time do you get up? And, listen, the litany of things that challenge me. How many times do you get up in the night to go to the bathroom and things they want to ask a 58-year-old man? I'm like, this is none of your business. If we're honest spiritually, right? He said, do you want to be whole? Not do you want one simple solution to an issue or problem that you yourself are tired of putting up with, but do you want to be whole? Do you want to really be whole today? Do you want the whole thing to change? All of it. You'll be new. You'll be different. You'll think differently. You'll act differently. You could be whole. Do you want to be? I mean, that's what he's asking here. Do you want to be? Man, you ever get asked that? Like something happened to you and somebody asked you such a question like that? So I got a way back story from 1983, the summer of 1983. I wasn't 58, I was 17. And I worked at my school during the summer. I know bunches of y'all weren't born, so respect. That's what I'll say to all you who just decided I was old. How about a little respect? Hallelujah. But I worked at the school. They had a program for kids who were growing up in relative poverty. So it was an assistance program, but you had to work. And I think that was a good thing, but that's all I have to say about that. And so that summer, so during the school year, after school, I was a custodian before basketball practice. And then during the summer, this time I had graduated up to, I was riding a tractor mowing the grass. And when that school had 10 acres all the way back to the baseball field, man, all summer, all I did, by the time I got done mowing this area, I was already mowing this area. So I was just riding, had a 3-blade woods on the back of it, and I was mowing grass. And I always was wearing cut-off jeans. I had a tank top. What I did not wear, I'm just sorry for that picture for those of you following along at home. I mean, I had on some Converse. I was wearing my Chucks and my cut-off shorts. And I was very tan, and I rode my bicycle every day, the 2 miles. Y'all hush over here. I got some young folk over here that shaka-da-ga-da. Anyway, probably some of you at South too over there. He was there. All right, okay, it's fine. And so I ride my bicycle every day to work, to school, to work during the summer. And, I had a dirt road and then a little bit of pavement, and I would ride that thing. It was a 10-speed, and I had finally gotten big enough to barely ride it, right? And I had a boombox, what I would carry with me. I had no headphones, but I had a boombox. Yeah, I'm drawing y'all pictures. Yes, okay, everybody, fine. Okay, I had a mullet. Are you happy now? Are you happy? And it was blonde, all right? Are you happy? Okay, fine. Go look at old pictures of RW, those of you over at South. Okay, all right. Not taking the heat alone. But I'm riding my bicycle, and I work with some girls that were my age that were my really good friends, and I cared about what they thought. But they mama had picked them up this day from work, and I grew up in a tiny town, one intersection with a stop sign, but not a 4-way. I mean, there was through traffic, and there was one store in the middle of this one intersection. And the school was down here, and I'm riding my bicycle, my 10-speed, and I'm riding along on it, and I'm holding my boombox, and I'm riding with no hands. Right? And that car full of girls, they started to go, but I don't know what happened. Then they started to back up. And so I had to ditch. And I was wrapped up in bicycle, and boombox went everywhere, batteries are flying. And I slid up beside the back window where one of the girls stuck their head out the window. I'm embarrassed at this point. And they said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about it, y'all go ahead." Well, I was right beside the aforementioned one store at the one intersection, the one stop sign there in my town, and there was an old man what used to sit on the bench at that store named Herb Lastly. Herb saw the whole thing. Herb was old, and he lived with his dad. That's a fact. Thanks for knowing that was funny, David. It was true. And Herb walks out there, and he says, "Son, do you need some help?" And I said, "Yes. I think I might die." When we got me stood up and untangled from the bicycle, this was rough pavement. That part was pavement. It was that gravelly pavement. I was seeping blood out all over, and he helped me. I had to push my bicycle home, right? And I think that's us sometimes. That's the guy in this story. Like, we're fine, we're good. We're good, sure we are, right? We're good. But there's somebody that saw the whole thing. The girls didn't see it all. I slid up beside their window like, whoa, hey, what are you doing? You okay? I'm great. Sure. Hadn't started sleeping yet. Hallelujah. But Herb saw the whole thing. He saw the whole thing, church family. He knows how we got where we are, and he knows our entire situation, what's going on, and he knows how to heal it. Again, back to his question, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to change? We talked about that during the change series. First most important principle to change is deciding that you want to change. And can I say to you, it's okay to step back a little further even from that. Maybe you're not there. You're like, man, I want to change. That's a good start. Maybe you were honest and you know you don't really want to change because that's partly why you haven't. Like, there's some things that will have to change. If you change, you're not ready to change those things. But maybe this morning you could just want to change. Like, you could recognize something has to be different. I can't live any longer in this kind of broken or this sin pattern or this desperation. And you can want to change. I mean, it was, again, a fair question. 38 years, identity wrapped around his brokenness. He didn't even know how to be somebody that wasn't broken. 38 years. His friend circle was dependent on his broken. This was who he was. But then Jesus showed up. And he changes our identity back to original intent. Right? What he wants, what he wills. And whole means no more excuses. Two means if I let God make me whole, I can't cuss out and fuss out anymore. And I can't blame everybody else for my circumstance. I can't say, well, if that hadn't happened and I wasn't broken, I wouldn't be staying up half the night looking at porn when I ought to be hanging out with my wife. Ow. Did not pre-plan that. But, I mean, that's a lot of things, everybody. Help me, Jesus. Do you want to change? Me, listen, I end up in a lot of these conversations, and sometimes I'm the one having to get the challenge, so don't misinterpret that. But you sit with people, and you start working on some relational dynamic, and you've done it for a minute, and you say, okay, let's start here. Do you want to? Whatever it is. Do you want to not be addicted anymore? And that's not just chemical, everybody. Or do you want to stay married? Because I don't want to use my life currency working on something if you don't. Oof. Y'all know it's hard to preach this hard. Do you want to change? Do you want to be whole? And listen, hear me when I say this. It's not the only question, but it is the first question. It's the first question. It's not the only one. There are other questions. There are other things the Lord wants to dig into, but that is the first question. Do you want to be made whole? And here, so another takeaway for us is this. The question is not how or why you're broken. He already knows. He saw it all. But do you want to be made whole? That's the question. Listen, don't mistake Jesus in this story. He is obsessed with you. That's how much he loves you. That's how much he cares about you. He only wants you whole and healed. That's what he wants. He numbers your hairs, everybody. He just knows. That's who he is. So don't get it twisted. He loves you so much. And here's the man's response. John 5:6 says, the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm going, another steps in before me." Now again, in all honesty, man, you go back to the text receptus and the older text, the whole angel stirred the water is not even in the text. And the truth is we don't know whether there was healing in the water or not. I mean, we don't. That isn't represented in the word. What we know is that they thought that there was. And so his reason, I mean, this dude is like I just go for it. I'm just going to go ahead and get myself in trouble everywhere. This is like the original Gen Z right here. It's not my fault. Just thought I'd float it out there. I mean, and it's Western culture, everybody. Not y'all, not the Gen Zs in this house. Y'all are in church and nobody made you come. Hallelujah. I love y'all. Come on, come on. But we got some witnessing to do, everybody. Because nobody can do enough to me to keep me from being whole when it is Jesus who's standing in front of me. Nobody. And it's no good to get away with making excuses. And in our Western culture, entitlement and complaining, yeah, there's a reason for every challenge, and it's never us. I mean, I'll tell you, my mom's name was Mary, just like Jesus's. And she would say, I don't want to hear an excuse. She would literally say, you can either make an excuse or you can make a difference. Back to verse 5. This man is focused on his problems, and they were legit. Look, he didn't even have those four. Remember the four dudes that lowered brother into a room with Jesus? He didn't even have those four dudes. I mean, he did have some challenges, right? So that wasn't happening in his life. He didn't have those four guys to lower him in. But he was focused on his problem, what he didn't have when his solution was standing right in front of him. Another takeaway is this: if you focus on your problems, you'll likely miss your provision. Y'all still love me, right? Yes. Whew, brother's sweating up here. I mean, the argument for broken is my hurt, my history, perceived or real disadvantages. See Gideon, right? Look, I'm the least in my family's the least in Israel, and I'm the least in my family. I mean, there's always some excuse that we can make for not being who God made us to be. We could talk about personal patterns and tendencies. I've always been this way, and I get it, man. I got those too. You can always make a good argument for broken, but the argument for whole is Jesus. The counterpoint is punchy. All of that, but then there's, what about God's provision? I practiced this in the mirror because it applied to me. What about God's provision? What about the way He's loved you? What about the people He's put in your life? What about the way He's surrounded you with an opportunity to be whole and healed and changed? What about that? What about that argument? Do you see Him directing your steps? I do. I see Him directing my steps. The victim mentality might be a legit argument against destiny and freedom if it wasn't for Jesus. Jesus said to him, so he makes this argument, and Jesus didn't even address it. I mean, I've joked for a long time. If I had been Jesus, I'd have been like, hey, I got some guys that can throw you in the water. We can handle this. I got these dudes. You got nobody? I got people. He didn't say that. He skipped straight to get up. Get up. Get up. I don't think he said it like that. Get up. Get up. I was getting in trouble for my tone there. Get up. I think he said it forcefully. Get up. Well, I got nobody. See what happens is, and then they always beat me in the, get up. Take up your bed. And walk. Fresh poem for this morning. Have you ever felt like a puzzle with pieces missing? Not quite complete. Or a song, good lyrics, nice tune, but a rhythm that's slightly off beat. Such a picture will always be lacking when you can't tell what the image could be. Like a ballad with an unfinished chorus. A note that's sung slightly off key. But the puzzle maker can replace any piece that's missing or somehow has been lost. The maestro can reveal the beauty in a song with redemptive rhythm that cannot be taught. The puzzle maker, the maestro, is Jesus. When we trust Him, He heals and restores. The picture, like a song, tells a story that the world cannot ignore. Carissa's going to join me. I'll get this landed for it. I love it. I mean, I felt like Jesus rolled up and said, look, you don't need to worry about that pool. I'm not even going to throw you in the pool. I don't need the pool. Whatever that is, I don't need the pool. That's not a problem. I don't need everything in your life to work the way that you think it should have for you to be whole and free. I'm not even going to put you in the pool. Get up, walk, receive your breakthrough, your healing, your restoration. I don't have to fix all that other stuff. I'm here to heal you. I don't need to come up with a solution. I'm the solution. That's Jesus. I'm going to ask the worship team actually here and at South to go ahead and join me. And look at what happened. At once, the man was healed. What? I just love it. Even before he was obedient. The chronology stays the same no matter what translation you look at. At once, the man was healed. Like when Jesus spoke it. Now all he had to do was choose to walk it out. Okay, so that was still important. He could have stayed laying on that stinky mat, even though he had been made whole. But he didn't. And he took up his bed and he walked. Last takeaway for us, Jesus is here to speak healing to the most bound and broken places in your heart and life. And this is what the enemy is fighting against. Our having a real encounter with Jesus that changes how we think and how we live. That's what he's fighting against. You wonder what he's fighting? That's what he's fighting against. I don't think he's messed up about us getting all gussied up to go to church. Not that we at 828 get all that gussied up, but, or that we worship like crazy. He don't like it, but that don't mess him up. Or that we give the preacher props or grief, whichever the case may be. What he don't want to see is people stand before the Lord and be made whole and free. He can't deal with that. The rest of the story, some religious people got ticked. The dude was carrying his mat on Sabbath, which wasn't even against the law, by the way. It was against their rules, but not Mosaic law. He wasn't allowed to be selling mats or carrying mats for business, but he was allowed to carry his own bed. They were all sideways, and he didn't even know who healed him at first. And then Jesus found him in the temple and said this, see, you're well. There have been so many things in my life that I didn't know. I just kept trying to follow Jesus, lean in, and then one day I felt the Lord say to me, look, see, you don't even remember. Look, see, look at you, see, you're well. Now, don't sin anymore. That stuff will mess you up. Be made whole. Live like you are. 38 years of lost and broken. For sure forgotten, or so it seemed. Until the day he sought me out. An unnamed healer came for me. He asked a simple question no one had ever asked before. Would you like to be made whole or stay here lying on the floor? It wasn't terse or ill-intended, but it reached straight for my heart. Of course I would, I responded, but I don't know where to start. If there really were a miracle for the first to step into the pool, I've never had a chance. The others here can be so cruel. Then before I knew what happened, his hand was reaching out to me. Get up, take your bed and walk. I'm here to make you whole and free. And I did. I stood and walked. Though I didn't catch his name, I knew from that day forward, I would never be the same. Lord, let it be in this house this morning. Let it be in Jesus' name. Let us lean in to your gift of grace and be made whole.